to my first monthly wrap-up. This is for the month of March. I read 10 books this month, which has been my overall best record in such a short period of time. Came out to a total of 3,384 pages, and my average rating was about a 3.5. Since this is my very first wrap-up, and I am including star ratings, I wanted to add a little tidbit about what those stars mean for me. I've noticed throughout my years of watching and exploring BookTube that some people have different reasons in rating books what they do. So I want to include my personal ratings and why I rate books the way that I do. Okay, so for me, the worst rating a book can get is a 0 or no rating at all, and that's because I DNF'd it. Now, I don't usually DNF books because for me, once I start something, I just have to finish it. I know other booktubers have no problem DNFing books, and that's fine for them. I have no feelings towards that. I just have a hard time personally quitting something that I started. There are 3 specific reasons and why I would, and that's if something is offensive in some way to a culture, or if it corners a specific demographic, if the characters are very aggressive or disrespectful to another culture, or if there's like an overabundance of foul language. Those just don't do it for me and tend to deter my interest completely. The second reason I would DNF a book is if the writing is just really poor. Things like too much repetition, poor wording choice, and writing that just doesn't spark my interest, or if I do not connect to the characters at all because of the way that it is written. And then the third reason I would DNF a book is if there are too many sex scenes. I feel like this can be done very tastefully, but I feel like it can also take up an entirety of the book and go from being a well-read novel to some trashy porn. If a book I read gets a 1 star, this is really just because I didn't like the story. I didn't like the story, I didn't like the characters, it did nothing for me, and there were just no redeemable qualities. If I give a book a 2-star rating, this is because I didn't completely find it a waste of time, and someone out there might enjoy it, but that person just wasn't me. 3 stars I feel like are the most common given rating, and that's among most booktubers, including myself. I give a book a 3-star rating if I enjoyed the book and I would recommend it, but I didn't fully love it. 3 stars also become a default rating for me if I don't quite understand my thoughts on the entirety of the book, which actually happens quite a lot, and sometimes I will rate it a certain number of stars afterwards, but 3 just is my initial rating if I just don't know where it falls. 4 stars are for books that I thoroughly enjoy and recommend, but they're just missing that small thing to make it a 5-star. I could absolutely love the story and hate the characters, or I could love the story up until about 80% and then hate the ending, or vice versa. If I enjoyed at least 80% or the majority of the book, I will give it a 4-star rating. And then 5 stars are, of course, a perfect rating all throughout. This means that the story was amazing, it captured my attention through and through. I really loved the characters and the character portrayal and the description, and I fell in love with the writing style, and usually 5 stars make me want more from that author, and the book just delivered from cover to cover. So with that out of the way, altogether this month I had 3 5-star ratings, 2 4-star ratings, 3 3 stars, 1 2-star, and 1 1-star. The first book I'm going to talk about is Not That I Could Tell by Jessica Strawser. This was a 1-star book for me, unfortunately. This is about a group of mothers who are also neighbors and friends, and one of the mothers disappears. It's told from 3 different perspectives, and it's loaded with secret histories from each of those women, which may or may not have something to do with the disappearance of Kristen. Now, there are a lot of problems I had with this book, not many redeeming qualities at all, which is why it was given 1 star. First of all, it was too long for what it needed to be. You didn't really need to know certain things. You didn't know what you were supposed to be paying attention to because there's so much. It just reminded me of when someone's trying to tell you a story and they just won't get to the point, and that was this book. Another problem I had is that all of the characters fell extremely flat. I couldn't connect to any of them. I couldn't distinguish the difference between many of them, and this is one of the problems I have with a lot of books, is that when there's too many characters, if the details aren't strong enough to allow me to separate them on my own, and I have to keep notes on it, that drives me nuts, and it just immediately knocks down a star rating. Another reason is that it was super predictable. I can't stand when mysteries are too predictable. It's just boring. I want some suspense in my life, and this did not do that at all. And along those lines, the pace was completely off. 1 second, something's happening, but it's not enough to give you that wow factor. And then the next minute, it's just boring, more description, more talking about these unnecessary characters. And not to mention the ending was just so uneventful. Overall, it was super corny. My final thought on this is that it kind of was almost like a ripoff of Big Little Lies. I feel like even the characters had so many similarities, it's hard to miss. So if you've read Big Little Lies and you pick this one up, please tell me your thoughts on that, because I'm curious if it's just me. My next low star rating book is I See You by Claire Macintosh. I know everybody loves Claire Macintosh if you want a good thriller. This book I have owned since 2017. I bought it at an Unlikely Story. And I've had it on my shelf for 3 years now, and I've picked it up 3 different times, finally finished it, did not like it. I was so disappointed. I ended up ordering the audiobook from Libby because I just couldn't get through this, and the reason it has 2 stars and not 1 star is because the end did kind of redeem itself. So this book is told by 2 different perspectives, and that's Zoe and Kelly. Zoe is a woman in her mid-40s who's on her commute one day to work on a train, and she picks up a newspaper and she sees a photo of herself in a personal ad with a number and all that. And Kelly is a younger detective who is working to solve mysteries that involve those personal ads and photographs of those women who are also victims of violent crimes and murder. Now, as suspenseful as this synopsis seems, because I was intrigued right away, that's why I paid full price for it, it completely fell flat at least 85% of this book. I would say that the ending did fix my rating, and I could even give it a 2.5 because the ending was pretty awesome. Because even though it took forever to figure out who was running this operation, when we do find out, I was pretty surprised. Did not see this coming at all. It was not predictable. But the rest of the book, I absolutely hated it. Dragged on. It dragged on, and I can honestly say if I didn't read this book, my life wouldn't be all that bad. Okay, the next one I'm going to talk about, I'm actually super disappointed in giving it this rating. It's still a 3-star, but I was hoping to give it more because it's my first Stephen King novel, and this is Misery by Stephen King. I did read Stand By Me way back in high school, but all I remember about that book is really the movie and the characters, so I don't count that one. I do want to pick that one up again because I know I enjoyed it. But Misery is one that I picked up because I had seen this movie a long, long time ago, and I actually enjoyed it, and I liked the suspense that it held. Misery is about a well-known author named Paul who gets in a pretty bad car accident because of a snowstorm that he was driving in. And then along comes Miss Annie Wilkes, and she is his #1 fan, and shit gets weird. Not only is she a psychopath, but she's overly obsessed and manic, and she has complete control over him and his recovery. I did enjoy the story. It was the writing style that threw me off. I feel like there were some weird choices made when writing this, and it was things like there'd be, mainly in the beginning, we would be in the middle of a thought or in the middle of a dialogue, and it would just cut off and start a new chapter. I'm very traditional in when I like to read a book. I like traditional formatting, and this just didn't have it. So I'm actually really curious if you could put some comments down below. Tell me if all Stephen King is like this or if it's just this one. Dialogue was great. The character description and portrayal was awesome. Annie Wilkes is pretty insane, but she's a really cool character to read about and learn about. And I must say that Kathy Bates did a sensational job in the motion picture. This is my first choice from him because he has a very limited selection in non-horror books. I am a huge baby, so I will not read horror. I will not read ghosts, any kind of demonic or paranormal presence. It's just not for me. So I picked up this one thinking it would be a good place to start with Stephen King, and I was disappointed to give it a 3-star. But if you have any suggestions, please leave them in the comments below. The next 3-star book I want to talk about is The Girl Before by J.P. Delaney. Now, this book I would definitely recommend to people just kind of getting into the thriller genre. It's more of a soft thriller. Because I've been enthralled in this genre for over a year now, I've read all the hard-hitting ones and the really suspenseful ones, so this didn't quite give me that wow factor I wanted, but it was enough to keep me entertained. This is a story from 2 women, again, told from 2 different perspectives, and one is from the present and one is from the past. And I have to say that the different tenses is done very, very well throughout this entire book. This is one of the few that I actually enjoy reading where it flip-flops from the tenses. So Jane and Annie are the 2 women and they've both been through some traumatic events that lead them to where they are today, which is renting a house on 1 Folgate Street. They both move in and weird things start to happen to both of them in separate time periods. So with that in mind, the synopsis sounds awesome. I was so intrigued. The cool thing about it was that this house took on pretty much its own character. That was such a cool element, cool factor to add into a book, and I've just never read anything like that. It was very unique. The house on 1 Folgate Street had many guidelines that had to be followed, and even throughout the first couple chapters, you are given snippets of the interview process before they can even become an applicant, so that was really interesting. And that's really all I want to say about the synopsis, because I think it's better to get into it without knowing too much, because it's just a really fun experience. As I said, the reason this is only a 3-star for me is because it just didn't have that shock and awe factor. I kind of knew what was going to happen towards the middle of it. I was starting to figure it out, so it was a little predictable. But, like I said, I think if you're just starting to get into this genre, you will like this, and it was definitely memorable. My last 3-star book is As Long as You Both Shall Live by Joann Chaney. This is a domestic thriller that I picked up really cheap on Book Outlet. This is about 2 marriages, past and present, and included in the synopsis is the reveal that the husband is the same exact person. His name is Matt. So that was the first problem I had with this book, because I felt like they could have kept that a secret and it would have had so much more of a shock value. So anyway, the story takes place with Matt and Marie, and they're going hiking on like this little vacation that she planned to kind of rekindle their romance. And on this hike, Marie doesn't return. When the detectives get involved, they learn that Matt was previously married and that woman died of a suspicious death. Which, again, is all in the synopsis. I'm not spoiling anything. And that's why this was only a 3-star, because I was so disappointed by the synopsis. I feel like it gave way too much away. It could have been so much more enjoyable had I not known all the details going into it. There were so many times where I was reading it and I was like, that could have been a mystery. That would have been an amazing plot twist. That would have been such a cool reveal. And yeah, it just... throughout the entire book, I was like, what the crap? Why would you do that? The mystery is basically mapped out for the reader before they even buy it. Another thing that irked me about this book was that the author added in a backstory of this quote-unquote washed out detective that I felt was 100% a waste of paper. Like, I still don't understand, and maybe I missed the part, but I still don't understand why that was such an important factor in this book, when she could have utilized all that time and energy in describing him and his history to the actual mystery, to the actual story that makes you have that actual shock and awe factor. So with that being said, it didn't have that bone-chilling, chilling to the core, or striking feeling that was promised in the back cover of this book, but it did have a really cool ending. But I think if you go into it not knowing what's going to happen, you will enjoy the experience more. Of course, I just told you what it's about, so... but I think because you already know a good chunk of it, it's just not as enjoyable. I would recommend this to someone who's just kind of getting into the domestic thriller genre, much like I said with the last book. It does kind of have a Gone Girl feel, so if you enjoyed that one, you might enjoy this one. It wasn't a complete waste of time, but I was pretty disappointed. Now on to 4 stars. I am super late jumping on the bandwagon with this book. Most of you have read it, and that is Fangirl by Rowell. And I did really enjoy this one, which is why I give it 4 stars. It touches topics like social anxiety, and that's huge for me. And then also fan fiction, which is why I wasn't going to pick this up in the first place, because I don't know anything about fan fiction, and it's never been something I wanted to look into. And I also have never read a fantasy book, and I don't really have any intentions of reading one anytime soon, so I wasn't sure I was going to like this, but I was wrong. So Fangirl is about Kath, and it's about her journey through her first year of college. Kath is a twin sister to Ren, and they've been attached to the hip. Ren decides when she goes to college, she wants to start her own life without her twin. And while Ren is all for it, Kath is not. She relies on her sister for a lot of things. So this is also the journey of her finding herself, becoming her own, and the experiences that she goes through. It also has that element of the fan fiction, where Kath is a dedicated fan fiction writer for her beloved Simon Snow fantasy series. And there are many parts of this book that include inlets of her actual fan writing and the actual Simon Snow series. It'll add like little bits in there. Things that I loved about this book were the topics of social anxiety. Kath reminded me a lot of myself. She's probably the most relatable character that I've ever read. And there were so many times that I was reading this and I just wanted to reach out and hold her hand and be like, you'll get through this. And there were also abandonment issues that she was having that I don't want to mention too much about if you haven't read it, because again, I like to keep my recommendations as abridged as possible. My only complaints about this book were super personal reasons, and that is the character of her sister Ren. I absolutely hated her, and I totally get that that's like, it was done on purpose, but I just hated her so much that it made me not want to read the book. And then the only other thing that I wasn't crazy about was how much fan fiction there was in here. My next 4-star book was actually the last one that I read, and that is You Are Not Alone by Greer, Hendricks, and Sarah Pekkenen. As some of you may know, I absolutely love the two of them and how they collaborate together. I have An Anonymous Girl right here. It's easily one of my favorite books. I also like The Wife Between. So whatever they write, I will pick up and read. Again, I don't want to tell you too much about this because the synopsis is extremely vague. It's from 2 different perspectives. Shay is the main character, and Shay kind of has a difficult life. She kind of always gets the short end of the stick between her love life, her job, her living situation, and she just wants a break. And then come the Moore sisters, Jane and Cassandra, and they live this high-end, richy life, glamorous life, and it seems to Shay that nothing can touch them, and she wants nothing more than to be a part of their lives in whatever way she can be. We do hear from a couple of other perspectives of the women in this book, but I'm not going to go into too much detail there, other than the fact that I did have to keep notes to keep the names straight with the stories. So I mostly love this book because of the writing style. Like I said, I absolutely love the way they collaborate together. It kept me on my toes the entire novel. I couldn't wait to figure things out and see where it was going to go. And then what I absolutely love about them is that they put in these little details that you try to remember, and they mean something in the end, usually always. So that's such a cool element for me because I couldn't wait to figure out what those would mean. The only thing that kept it from being a perfect 5-star rating for me was, again, a personal problem, and that's just the many characters that were in it. It's something I maybe will grow out of, I don't know, but it drove me nuts in here because trying to keep everything straight. But with that being said, it was very important to know who was who throughout the entire novel. I also wasn't a huge fan of Shay's character, which I've experienced before in their books. The main character kind of seems really gullible to me and kind of desperate, which I didn't like, and maybe that was supposed to happen. I feel like I'm shouting into the book, like, have you never seen a psychological thriller before? What are you doing? And that's kind of how I felt the majority of reading and learning Shay's character. Okay guys, we're almost done. I have 3 5-star books left to talk to you about. And this one is just like Fangirl. I was super late to jump on the bandwagon, but I have owned it for a while. I just had yet to pick it up. And that is Big Little Lies by Liane Morarity. The reason I actually ended up picking this up is because earlier on in February, I put up a poll on my Facebook and Instagram page and asked people if I should read the book first or watch the show first, and which do they recommend. It was honestly pretty split down the middle, so I decided, let me watch the show first. I'm the type of person that can watch a movie or watch a show and then read the book, or vice versa, and nothing gets ruined for me, really. In this case, I really, really loved the show. It was probably one of my favorite shows that I've ever watched. So anyway, after I watched that, I fell in love with it, and I decided to pick the book up, and equally fell in love with this. And I think the best part was that the show gave me names to faces, which made it so much easier to read this. So it's about a large group of mothers all going through the motions of bringing their kids to school, being a part of the PTA. There's friendships, there's bonds, there's domestic violence, there's betrayal, there's funny characters, and there's a murder, and we don't know who did it, and we don't even know who was murdered. This book is one big scandal wrapped up in a pretty pink bow, lipstick, and heels. I loved it so much. I also loved Madeline's character. I feel like she's like the mayor of Big Little Lies, and she was just really fun to read. There are a lot of characters, but I was fascinated by all of them. There was not one character in this book that fell flat. They were all very dynamic, so different. And I honestly just don't have one complaint about this book. So it was great, and I hope you all pick it up and read it, and definitely watch the show afterwards. All right, my next 5-star read, I was totally blown away with the fact that this was 5 stars for me, because I had no idea what it was about going into it. I just knew it was recommended by a lot of people, and that is The Female of the Species by Mindy McGinnis. I believe it's considered YA, but there are some hard-hitting topics in this book. I read somewhere that it was described as harsh but compelling journey into the heart of our society's rape culture and violence against women. Alex is the main character, and she's probably one of my favorite characters. She's a young girl in high school, and she has just experienced way more than a young woman should ever have to. And I don't want to talk too much about why she is the way she is, but because of a traumatic event in her life, she takes life by the balls, and she's not afraid to be who she is, and she's not afraid to stand up for herself and what she believes in. And I just admire her so much. I think she's such a badass, and I think a lot of young women need to read this book. It kind of breaks my heart a little bit, because despite how strong of a character she is, she's still desiring to be loved. And may that be the right or wrong person, it's still a strong desire. I devoured this book within 6 hours. I could not put it down. I absolutely loved it. There was nothing wrong with this. And I can't believe I left it on my shelf for as long as I did, because this was in my first book outlet order, like, I don't know, 9 months ago, and I just highly recommend this. Please read this. It's so good. And then the last 5-star book I can't wait to talk about, because it was my all-time favorite book. It's currently holding the place for all-time favorites, and that is Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I just cannot say enough good things about this. So Daisy Jones and the Six is a fictional story about the rise and fall of a 70s or late 60s rock band. Daisy Jones, who is a singer-songwriter, gets an opportunity to collaborate with Billy Dunn and his group, The Six, and an amazing bond begins to grow between Daisy and Billy and the group as a whole. So my favorite things about this book are, number one, the formatting. It's all written in interview style. The concept just amazed me, and I would love to read more books like that. And then along with this, if you haven't read this, or if you have read it and you haven't listened to the audiobook, you have to listen to the audiobook. I can't stress that enough. It's a full cast. They're all amazing, and they just totally capture the complete persona of these characters, the complete tones of the story. Like Daisy's voice, whoever narrates her, and I can't remember her name, but whoever narrates her is friggin' amazing. She completely captures her entire personality. Another thing I absolutely loved about this book is that toward the end of the book, there is this reveal that you don't expect to happen. And it really did make me cry. I could not believe this thing. I don't want to tell anyone, obviously. But yeah, it made me tear up pretty bad. This book is also just so real. It touches upon drugs and addiction and sex and love lost and gained, and again, the rise and fall of a rock band. And it just captures all that is the 70s. I could feel the truth of the 70s in these very pages. I could not have seen a better ending coming. It was just, it wrapped it all up so perfectly. I recently watched an interview with Taylor Jenkins Reid because I wanted to get to know more about her. And she just seems like the most down-to-earth, cool person. And this is the first book I've read by her, so needless to say, all of her books are sitting in my Amazon cart right now. I just pray that the movie adaptation that they're making, or it could be a show, has an awesome cast, because she's going to be a tough character to nail. And I hope that they do Taylor Jenkins Reid justice and Daisy Jones justice. To be honest, if I could pick someone, it would be Pink, because every time they were talking about lines in a song, she is all I heard and saw, because she's got that rough, raspy rocker voice, and she's just badass, and so isn't Daisy. Okay guys, thanks so much for watching. I know this was a long one. I had a lot of books to cover and talk about. I hope that I gave you some good recommendations, and I hope that you can leave some good recommendations in the comments below. Pretty soon I'll be having a book outlet unhaul, and I can't wait to show you guys the books that I'll be reading for next month, and I'll talk to you guys soon.